A single laugh. That's all it took to ignite a firestorm at Gate B37 of New York's JFK Airport. It wasn't a laugh of joy or humor. It was a sound of pure cutting disdain aimed at a middle-aged black woman and her unassuming, scuffed-up carry-on bag. The man who laughed clad in a suit worth more than a month's rent saw only a worn-out piece of luggage. He had no idea he was mocking the very woman who held the master key to the multi-million-dollar aircraft they were about to board. What began as a moment of casual arrogance would unravel into a high-stakes drama of hidden identity corporate panic and the ultimate poetic justice delivered at 35,000 feet. The controlled chaos of John F. Kennedy International Airport was a familiar symphony to Dr. Daisy Moore. The rhythmic click-clack of roller bags, the distant garbled announcements, the low hum of thousands of conversations blending into a single ambient roar, it was the soundtrack of her life's work. At 58, Daisy was a woman who moved with a quiet, deliberate grace that belied the immense power she wielded in her industry. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her simple, comfortable travel attire, a pair of dark trousers and a cashmere sweater, spoke of practicality over glamour. Her destination was Seattle. For most, it was a trip to see the Space Needle or visit Pike Place Market. For Daisy, it was a pilgrimage. She was flying to Payne Field in Everett, Washington, home of the sprawling Boeing assembly plant, for a critical final review of the new engine performance data on the 787-10 Dreamliner fleet. The one item that never left her side was her carry-on. It wasn't a chic modern roller from Toomey or Rimowa. It was a heavily modified graphite-colored Pelican case. Its hard shell exterior was a road map of her career, etched with scuffs from windy tarmacs in Mojave, scratches from tight squeezes in fuselage mock-ups in Charleston, and a faint smear of hydraulic fluid from a near disaster averted in Toulouse years ago. To the untrained eye, it looked old, beaten, and cheap. To Daisy, it was a vault. Inside, nestled in custom foam cutouts, were not clothes or toiletries, but a high-precision calibration toolkit, a ruggedized tablet holding terabytes of proprietary schematics, and the original prototype of a sensor she had designed to detect microfractures in composite materials. This case held parts of her soul. Boarding for Global Air Flight 815 to Seattle had just begun. The gate agent's voice crackled over the PA system, announcing the pre-boarding for Diamond Medallion members. A ripple of self-importance went through the waiting area. A man in a tailored navy blue suit, his hair perfectly coiffed, and his face set in a mask of impatient privilege, pushed himself to the front of the line. This was Marcus Anderson. Marcus was a partner at a high-powered private equity firm, a man who believed his net worth granted him priority access to every aspect of life. Daisy was in Zone 1, scheduled to board right after the premium passengers. As the line shuffled forward, Marcus Anderson, having already boarded, had apparently decided his overhead bin space was insufficient. He had stepped back out onto the jet bridge, barking into his phone while blocking the entrance. "No, you tell Henderson that if the deal isn't on my desk by the time I land, we're pulling out." He snapped his voice, echoing in the enclosed space. Daisy waited patiently behind him. The line stalled. A young flight attendant, Sarah, stood at the aircraft door, her smile looking increasingly strained. "Sir, if you could please step inside the aircraft to allow other passengers to board," she asked politely. Marcus held up a hand, dismissing her without even looking. 1 minute. He turned, and in doing so, his gleaming leather briefcase knocked squarely into Daisy's Pelican case. He glanced down his eyes, taking in the scuffed utilitarian object at her feet. A smirk crawled across his face. And then came the laugh. It was a short, sharp, ugly sound. A huff of derision. "Seriously," he said, his voice dripping with condescension as he ended his call. He looked from the case up to Daisy's face, his gaze dismissive. They let people bring that on board. Now I'd be embarrassed to check that, let alone carry it on. Daisy's spine stiffened. Decades of navigating boardrooms filled with men like Marcus had taught her the value of composure. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "It suits my needs," she said, her voice calm and even. Marcus wasn't finished. "My golf clubs have a better travel case. You should really invest in some proper luggage. It's about presenting yourself professionally." He gestured vaguely at her simple attire, the judgment clear. To him, she was an insignificant nobody who had somehow stumbled into the priority boarding line. The line behind them was growing restless. Sarah, the flight attendant, stepped forward again. "Sir, we really need to keep the aisle clear." Marcus turned his venom on her. "I'm trying. But this woman's thing," he said, nudging the Pelican case with the toe of his expensive Italian loafer, "is taking up the whole jet bridge. It probably won't even fit in the overhead." "It's a standard carry-on dimension," Daisy stated, her voice losing a fraction of its warmth. "It will fit." "I doubt it," Marcus sneered. "It looks like something you'd use to carry rusty tools. You should have checked it, or better yet, thrown it away." He then did something that crossed a line. He reached down, grabbed the handle of her case, and tried to shove it behind her. "Here, let me move this piece of junk for you." Daisy's hand shot out and clamped down on his wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Do not," she said, her voice, now dangerously low and quiet, "touch my property. Again." The sudden intensity of her response startled Marcus. He snatched his hand back as if he'd been burned. The other passengers on the jet bridge were now openly staring. Sarah's face had gone pale. The small, confined space was thick with tension. The symphony of the airport had faded, replaced by a silence punctuated only by the hum of the aircraft's auxiliary power unit and the sound of a confrontation that was just getting started. For a moment, no one moved. Marcus Anderson, accustomed to a world that bent to his will, looked genuinely stunned that he had been challenged. His face flushed with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "Who do you think you are?" He hissed, his voice low enough to keep the conflict from boiling over into a full-blown shouting match, but sharp enough to cut. "I was trying to help you." "I didn't ask for your help," Daisy replied, releasing her grip but not her unwavering gaze. She adjusted her case, placing it firmly between her feet. "I asked you not to touch my bag." Sarah, the young flight attendant, felt the situation slipping from her control. Her training dictated that she de-escalate, but Marcus Anderson was a Diamond Medallion member, the kind of customer the airline drilled into its employees to appease. Daisy, in her plain clothes, registered as a nobody. In Sarah's panicked calculus, Marcus was the priority. "Mom," Sarah began, her voice trembling slightly. "Perhaps if the bag is an issue, we could check it for you at the gate. There will be no charge." Daisy turned her calm, steady eyes to Sarah. "That won't be possible. This bag stays with me." Marcus saw his opening. He puffed out his chest, playing the role of the aggrieved, reasonable party. "See, she's being difficult. I'm just trying to get to my seat, my first-class seat, I might add, and she's blocking the way and getting aggressive." "The only aggression here, sir, was your attempt to handle my belongings without my permission," Daisy countered coolly. The argument had now created a significant bottleneck. Passengers in Zone 1 were craning their necks, murmuring to each other. The purser, a senior flight attendant named David Chen, had been alerted to the delay and was making his way up the crowded jet bridge from inside the plane. David was the antithesis of the flustered Sarah. With over 20 years of experience, he had a zen-like calm and an uncanny ability to read people. He sized up the scene in an instant, the enraged, entitled businessman and the unnervingly composed woman who refused to be intimidated. "Is there a problem here?" David asked, his voice a soothing baritone that immediately commanded attention. "Yes," Marcus exclaimed, turning to him. "This woman is refusing to move, and her oversized, beat-up luggage is a hazard." David looked at the Pelican case. His eyes, unlike Sarah's, were more discerning. He recognized the brand. He'd seen them used by federal agents, by film crews with expensive camera gear, and by engineers. They weren't fashion statements. They were tools for professionals. He then looked at Daisy. He saw no anger in her eyes, only a deep, unshakable resolve. "Ma'am, what seems to be the issue with the bag?" David asked, his tone respectful. "There is no issue with the bag," Daisy said. "It meets all size requirements. The issue is with this gentleman's behavior." "I will be filing a formal complaint," Marcus blustered, "about her and about your crew's inability to handle a simple boarding process." David ignored him for a moment, focusing on Daisy. There was something about her, a quiet authority that he instinctively trusted more than Marcus Anderson's loud demands. "Ma'am, is there any way we can stow the bag to resolve the situation and get the passengers boarded? We're behind schedule." "This bag cannot be checked," Daisy stated simply. "The contents are fragile, irreplaceable, and critical for my work in Seattle. It must remain in my possession and be stowed in the cabin." Her choice of words was precise, critical, irreplaceable. "Then let's find a space for it," David said decisively. He turned to Marcus. "Sir, if you would please proceed to your seat. 2A, I will handle this." Marcus looked as if he was about to argue further, but David's authoritative tone, backed by 2 decades of dealing with men exactly like him, left no room for negotiation. With a final venomous glare at Daisy, Marcus stormed onto the plane. David gave Daisy a small apologetic nod. "My apologies for that. Let's get you on board. I'll find a secure spot for your case myself." Daisy followed him onto the aircraft, the tension from the jet bridge following her like a shadow. As she walked through the first-class cabin, she saw Marcus, already settled in his plush seat, a glass of champagne in hand, speaking in a loud, deliberate voice to the passenger next to him. Unbelievable. The airline is letting just anyone into the priority zones now. No standards. And her luggage looked like it had been pulled from a dumpster. Daisy ignored him, her face a mask of neutrality. David led her past the premium cabins into the main cabin. She found her seat an aisle in the economy plus section. As she prepared to lift her case into the overhead bin, David stopped her. "Let me," he offered. He took the case surprised by its weight. It was dense, heavy. He slid it carefully into the bin, noting that it fit perfectly, with room to spare. As he closed the bin door, he looked back at Daisy, who had settled into her seat and was already pulling out a technical journal. There was a nagging feeling in his gut. Her composure had been almost superhuman. And her words on the jet bridge, "critical for my work," it felt like more than just an excuse. He walked back to the galley at the front of the aircraft where Sarah was shakily pouring orange juice. "You okay?" he asked gently. "That man was horrible," she whispered. "They often are," David said, his eyes glancing towards the cockpit door. "But I'm more curious about the woman. There's something about her. Did you get her name?" "Moore. Daisy Moore. Seat 12C," Sarah replied, checking her tablet. David nodded slowly. The name meant nothing to him, but the incident felt unresolved, like the first tremor before an earthquake. He had a feeling that the drama surrounding the scuffed Pelican case was far from over. The final checks were underway. Captain Eva Rostova and her first officer, a young, sharp pilot named Ben Carter, were running through the pre-flight checklist. Eva was a veteran pilot with over 15,000 flight hours, most of them in the left-hand seat of long-haul jets. She was known for her meticulous attention to detail and her intolerance for drama. Her cockpit was a sanctuary of order and procedure. A soft knock came at the door. "Come in," Eva said, not looking up from her instruments. David Chen slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind him. "Captain, sorry to disturb. We have a situation." Eva finally looked up, her piercing blue eyes fixing on David. "A situation?" she repeated. "Is it a security threat?" "No, not a security threat. A passenger dispute that happened during boarding. It's settled for the most part, but something about it is bothering me," David explained. He quickly recounted the incident on the jet bridge, Marcus Anderson's arrogance, Daisy Moore's refusal to check her bag, and the tense standoff. Ben Carter swiveled in his chair. "A dispute over a carry-on, David. We get a dozen of those a day." "I know," David said, but this was different. The man Marcus Anderson in 2A is a classic entitled bully. But the woman Daisy Moore in 12C, she was different. She said the contents of her bag were fragile, irreplaceable, and critical for her work in Seattle. And when I mentioned the delay, she didn't budge. She has an air of absolute authority about her. It's not arrogance, it's confidence. Something tells me we should be aware of it. Eva listened intently. 99% of passenger disputes were ego-driven noise, but David Chen wasn't prone to exaggeration. If he felt something was off, it was worth paying attention to. The last thing she needed on a 6-hour transcontinental flight was a simmering conflict that could erupt mid-air. "Okay," Eva said, her voice decisive. "I'll go have a word. I'd rather nip this in the bud on the ground than deal with it at 37,000 feet." Leaving Ben to continue the checklist, Eva unbuckled herself and strode into the cabin. The presence of a uniformed captain walking through the aisle immediately silenced the chatter. Passengers looked up, some with curiosity, some with alarm. She went to Marcus Anderson's seat first. "Mr. Anderson, I'm Captain Rostova. I was informed there was a disagreement during boarding. Is everything all right?" Marcus, who had been enjoying his pre-departure champagne, was momentarily taken aback. Seeing the 4 stripes on Eva's epaulets, he immediately put on his most charming, reasonable facade. "Captain, thank you for coming by. It was nothing, really. Just a minor issue with another passenger who was being rather stubborn about her luggage. But your purser, David, handled it. Everything is fine now." He smiled, expecting a conspiratorial nod, a shared understanding between 2 important people. Eva gave him a curt, professional nod and moved on. Her smile was gone. She walked down the aisle to seat 12C. "Ms. Moore?" She asked, her voice softer than it had been with Marcus. Daisy looked up from her journal. "It's Dr. Moore," she corrected gently. "But yes, Dr. Moore, I'm Captain Rostova. My purser informed me about the situation with your carry-on. I just want to personally assure you that once we're in the air, my crew will ensure there are no further disturbances. However," she paused, her gaze dropping to the floor where Daisy had a small satchel, "I do need to understand the nature of your refusal to gate-check your bag. If an item is deemed too large or heavy during flight, the crew's instructions must be followed." Daisy closed her journal, giving the captain her full attention. She appreciated the directness. This was a professional, not a bureaucrat. "Captain," Daisy began, her voice even and respectful, "I can assure you the case meets every dimensional and weight requirement for carry-on luggage. The reason I could not allow it to be checked is a matter of professional necessity. The equipment inside is unique, highly sensitive, and is required for a critical operational review of this aircraft type upon my arrival in Seattle." Ava's eyebrows shot up. That was an interesting choice of words. Operational review of this aircraft type. It was specific, technical. It wasn't the vague, important work documents she was used to hearing. An operational review. Ava probed, intrigued. Are you a regulator with the FAA? Daisy offered a small, enigmatic smile. Something like that. Let's just say my work is intimately involved with the 787's continued airworthiness. The integrity of the equipment in that case is paramount. Checking it would have been an unacceptable risk. There it was again. The quiet, unshakable authority. Dr. Daisy Moore was not making an excuse. She was stating a fact. Ava looked at her, at the intelligence in her eyes, at the calm confidence in her posture, and she made a command decision. She believed her. Very well, Doctor. Ava said, a new note of respect in her voice. I understand. Thank you for your candor. Please don't hesitate to let my crew know if you need anything at all. As Ava walked back to the cockpit, Marcus Anderson watched her go, a smug look on his face. He assumed the captain had just given the difficult woman in economy a stern talking to. He felt vindicated. Back in the cockpit, Ava settled into her seat. So, Ben asked, what's the verdict? Ava was quiet for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. The guy in 2A is exactly what David said, a jerk. But the woman... Doctor, Moore. She's something else. Something else, how? She told me the bag was for a critical operational review of this aircraft type. She said her work was intimately involved with the 787's continued airworthiness. She's not an FAA inspector. I've met dozens of them, and they always identify themselves immediately. She didn't. Ben shrugged. Maybe some kind of corporate consultant. Maybe. Ava said, her hands dancing over the controls as she prepared for pushback. But I have a strange feeling there's more to it. Ben, once we're at cruising altitude and things are stable, do me a favor. Get on the horn with our Central Operations Center in Atlanta. Give them her name, Dr. Daisy Moore, seat 12C. See if she's flagged in our system for any reason. Corporate partner, special government, travel, something. I just want to know who we have on our plane. Will do, Captain, Ben said, as the massive Rolls-Royce engines of the Dreamliner spooled to life with their signature low hum. Ava couldn't shake the feeling that the most important person on this flight wasn't sitting in first class, but in seat 12C. And she was determined to find out why. The ascent from JFK was smooth, a graceful climb through scattered clouds into the brilliant, unforgiving blue of the stratosphere. Below, the sprawling metropolis of New York shrank to a glittering map. Inside the cabin of Global Air 815, the familiar rhythms of flight took over. The seatbelt sign pinged off. The flight attendants began their drink service. In seat 2A, Marcus Anderson was in his element. He had his laptop open, his noise-cancelling headphones on, and had already ordered his second gin and tonic. He'd occasionally glance back towards the economy cabin with a triumphant smirk. He had won. The insignificant woman with the junk box luggage had been put in her place by the captain, and the natural order of things had been restored. He felt a warm glow of satisfaction. In seat 12C, Dr. Daisy Moore was oblivious to his smugness. Her technical journal was open on her lap, but she wasn't reading. She was staring out the window, not at the clouds, but at the wing. Her wing. She watched the gentle, elegant flex of the carbon fiber composite structure as it absorbed the minor turbulence, a motion as familiar to her as her own breathing. She could trace the invisible lines of stress and airflow over its surface, could mentally picture the thousands of components working in perfect harmony beneath the smooth white skin. This was her creation. Her and a team of thousands, of course, but the fundamental architecture of the wing and the specific composite layup process had come from her team, born from her mind, over countless sleepless nights and endless simulations. The memory of Marcus Anderson's scorn still stung, not as a personal insult, but as an affront to the work. He had called her life's masterpiece, encapsulated in that pelican case, a piece of junk. The irony was so profound, it was almost comical. She felt a familiar weariness settle over her. It was the exhaustion that came from a lifetime of being underestimated, of having to prove herself tenfold in rooms where she was the only woman, the only person of color. Back in the cockpit, Captain Eva Rostova leveled the 787 at their cruising altitude of 37,000 feet. The autopilot was engaged, and the aircraft settled into its long westward journey. "Okay, Ben," Eva said, her eyes scanning the array of glowing screens. "We're stable. Make that call to Atlanta." "On it," Ben replied. He picked up the satellite phone, a direct line to Global Air's nerve center. A few moments later, he was connected. "Atlanta Ops, this is Global 815 First Officer Carter." The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "Go ahead, 815. "Atlanta, we have a passenger of interest on board. We're trying to get a little more information on her. The name is Moore, R-E-E-D. First name, Daisy E-V-E-L-Y-N. She's in seat 12C. We believe she may be a doctor." "Stand by, 815, the voice replied. In the background of the call, they could hear the faint click-clack of a keyboard. Eva and Ben waited in silence, the gentle hum of the avionics filling the cockpit. They expected a quick, simple answer. No flags on that passenger, or she's an employee of a corporate partner. Seconds stretched into a minute, then 2. This was unusual. A simple passenger lookup should have been instantaneous. 815, are you still there?" The voice from Atlanta came back, but the tone had changed. It was no longer calm. There was a new urgency, a hint of bewilderment. "Still here, Atlanta," Ben said. "What have you got?" "We're looking at her profile now. Just stand by 1 more minute. I'm escalating this." Escalating, Eva and Ben exchanged a look. "You escalated for security threats, for medical emergencies, for severe weather diversions. You didn't escalate a simple passenger query." A knot of apprehension tightened in Eva's stomach. Who was Dr. Daisy Moore? Another voice, deeper and more authoritative, came on the line. "Global 815, this is Robert Miller, Vice President of Flight Operations. Who am I speaking with?" Ben's eyes widened. "The VP of Ops himself." He swallowed hard. "First Officer Ben Carter, sir. Captain Rostova is here as well." "Captain Tay." Miller's voice was sharp, cutting straight to the point. "Confirm for me you have Dr. Daisy Moore on your aircraft." "Yes, sir, we do." Eva took the phone from Ben. "She's in 12C. There was a minor dispute during boarding. Is there a problem?" There was a pause on the other end, followed by a sound that might have been a nervous laugh or an exasperated sigh. "A problem, Captain, let me be very clear. Dr. Daisy Moore is not just a passenger. Look at her booking details. Who paid for the ticket?" Ben was already on his flight manifest tablet, his fingers flying across the screen. He pulled up the passenger details for 12C. His jaw dropped. "Captain, the ticket was purchased by the Boeing company. It's a first-class, fully flexible ticket. She chose to sit in economy plus." "That's right." Miller's voice crackled over the sat phone. "Captain, Dr. Moore isn't a regulator. She isn't a consultant. You need to understand who she is." Miller took a deep breath. "Dr. Daisy Moore is the chief design architect for the Boeing 787 Dreamliner program. Specifically, she is the lead engineer for the fuselage and wing assembly. She holds a dozen patents on the composite layering techniques that make this plane possible. Captain Rostova, you're not just flying a plane, you're flying her plane. The silence in the cockpit was absolute, broken only by the steady rhythmic hum of the very aircraft they were discussing. Ava felt a cold dread wash over her. The woman whose bag a first-class passenger had called junk. The woman the junior flight attendant had tried to force to check her priceless, irreplaceable tools. The woman she herself had questioned in the aisle. She wasn't just a VIP. She was aeronautical royalty. Holy, Ben whispered, staring at the manifest as if it were a sacred text. Captain. Miller's voice was dead serious now. What was the nature of the dispute during boarding? Ava's mind raced, replaying the entire incident. The condescending laugh, the kick at the bag, the public humiliation. Her stomach churned. This was no longer a passenger service issue. This was an international incident waiting to happen between the airline and its most important supplier. Rob, Ava said, her voice tight, we have a very, very big problem. The gravity of Robert Miller's words hung in the cockpit like a physical weight. The hum of the Rolls-Royce engines, a sound Ava usually found comforting, now seemed to mock her. They were a testament to the genius of the woman sitting just a few dozen feet behind her, a woman her airline had allowed to be mistreated. Ava, talk to me, Miller's voice demanded from the satellite phone. What happened? Ava took a steadying breath, her mind switching into crisis management mode. Our diamond medallion in 2A. Marcus Anderson made derogatory comments about Dr. Moore's carry-on, called it junk, and attempted to move it without her permission. A junior flight attendant following protocol, but lacking situational awareness, sided with Mr. Anderson and tried to get Dr. Moore to check the bag. I intervened on the ground. And Miller pressed. I questioned her as well. Ava admitted the words, tasting like ash. She was professional. She told me the equipment was for an operational review of this aircraft type. I believed her and let it go, but I had no idea of her identity. Anderson, on the other hand, has been smugly enjoying his champagne ever since. A string of curses came through the phone from the Vice President of Operations. So let me get this straight. We have the godmother of the Dreamliner flying on her own creation, and we let some private equity parasite in first class harass her over a piece of luggage that probably contains technology worth more than his entire portfolio. That about sums it up, Rob, Ava said grimly. Unacceptable, Miller snapped. Completely unacceptable. The Boeing partnership is worth billions to us. Dr. Moore is a legend. She rarely flies commercial. For this to happen on our aircraft, Ava, you need to fix this. Now. What are my orders? Ava asked, her voice pure steel. Your orders are to make this right. The customer in 2A is no longer a priority. Dr. Moore is. Your new mission is to ensure that when Dr. Daisy Moore deplanes in Seattle, she feels like the most valued passenger in the history of this airline. I don't care what it takes. Comp her flights for life. Offer her a public apology. Name a plane after her if you have to. But you fix it. Am I clear? Crystal, Ava replied. I'll handle it personally. And Ava. Miller added, his voice dropping slightly. This Mr. Anderson, use your discretion as captain, but disruptive, abusive behavior towards another passenger is grounds for action. I'll back any decision you make. The call ended. Ava turned to Ben, whose face was a mask of disbelief. You heard the man, she said, her expression grim. It's time to put on a show. She unbuckled her seatbelt. You have the con, Ben. Keep her straight and level. Yes, Captain, he said, his eyes wide. Ava strode out of the cockpit, her posture radiating an authority she hadn't displayed before. She didn't pause. She walked directly to the forward galley where David Chen was preparing for the next service. "David," she said in a low, urgent voice, "get me every amenity we have in first class. The best champagne we carry, the premium snack basket, the hot towels, the silk pillow, the noise-cancelling headphones from the pod seats. Everything." David looked at her confused. "For who, Captain Mr. Anderson?" Eva's eyes were like ice. "Mr. Anderson is about to have a very bad day. This is for Dr. Moore in 12C. David's professional curiosity piqued. "Captain, what's going on? Who is she?" "She's the woman who designed this plane," Eva said flatly. David Chen's jaw literally dropped. The years of practiced composure vanished, replaced by sheer, unadulterated shock. He stared at Eva, then back towards the main cabin where Daisy sat, and everything clicked into place. The Pelican case, the unshakable calm, the specific technical language. It all made sense now. "Get the items, David, and tell Sarah to meet me at row 12, Eva commanded. "It's time for a public course correction." Eva walked down the aisle, her purposeful stride turning heads again. She passed first class, deliberately avoiding eye contact with Marcus Anderson, who was now watching a movie, a smug grin still plastered on his face. She arrived at seat 12C. Daisy looked up from her journal, a flicker of surprise in her eyes, at seeing the captain again mid-flight. Eva stopped squarely in the aisle, creating a deliberate and very public audience of the surrounding passengers. She took a deep breath. "Dr. Moore." Eva began her voice, clear, formal, and loud enough for everyone in the nearby rows to hear. "On behalf of Global Air, and as the captain of this flight, I need to offer you my deepest, most sincere, and most profound apology." A hush fell over the cabin. This was unprecedented. "I have been made aware of the full circumstances of the incident during boarding." Eva continued, her gaze unwavering. "The treatment you received was unprofessional, unacceptable, and is a source of deep embarrassment to this airline. Your professionalism was met with ignorance, and for that, I am truly sorry." Daisy was taken aback, a rare expression of astonishment on her face. "Captain, that's not necessary." "It is absolutely necessary," Eva insisted. "We had a guest of unparalleled importance on our aircraft, and we failed to recognize it, and we allowed another passenger to treat you with a complete lack of respect." Just then, David and Sarah arrived. David held a silver tray, laden with a chilled bottle of Dom Perignon and a crystal flute. Sarah carried a basket of premium amenities. Eva took the champagne from David. "Dr. Moore, we know you chose this seat, but we would be honored if you would accept a small token of our gratitude, not just for your grace in this situation, but for your contribution to aviation, for giving us this magnificent aircraft to fly." She turned slightly, her voice rising so it would carry further. "For the other passengers here, I think it's important you know who you are flying with today. This is Dr. Daisy Moore. She is one of the lead engineers from Boeing who designed the 787 Dreamliner. She is the reason we are all flying so safely and comfortably to Seattle today." A wave of murmurs and gasps rippled through the cabin. People started to crane their necks. Phones discreetly came out as people began to Google her name. The man in 12B looked at Daisy as if she had just sprouted wings. Up in seat 2A, Marcus Anderson had taken off his headphones, sensing the shift in the cabin's atmosphere. He heard the words, "Dr. Daisy Moore, lead engineer, and designed the 787 Dreamliner." The blood drained from his face. The smug grin evaporated, replaced by a ghastly, pale horror. He looked back down the aisle and saw the captain of the plane personally pouring champagne for the woman he had ridiculed. The woman whose priceless case he had called a piece of junk. He began to feel very, very small. The cabin once his kingdom now felt like a courtroom, and the verdict was about to be delivered. The scene in the economy plus cabin was surreal. Passengers were staring, whispering, and looking at Dr. Daisy Moore with a newfound awe. She in turn looked overwhelmed by the sudden dramatic turn of events. She held up a hand, a gesture of polite refusal. "Captain, really this is too much," Daisy said, her voice quiet but firm. "I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm just a passenger on this flight. I don't require any special treatment." "With all due respect, Dr. Fe," Ava replied, her voice softening but losing none of its conviction. "You are not just a passenger. You are an honored guest, and we insist. If you won't take the first-class seat we should have given you in the first place, please at least allow us to make the rest of your journey as pleasant as we possibly can." Seeing she was cornered by an overwhelming display of respect, Daisy finally relented, with a small, gracious nod. "Thank you, Captain. That's very kind." David Chen, beaming, placed the amenities on the empty middle seat beside her, creating a private space for her. He spoke in a low voice. "Dr. Moore, on a personal note, thank you. I've been flying for 20 years, and this aircraft is a marvel. It's an honor to have you on board." The interaction was a masterclass in service recovery, played out for the entire cabin to see. But Captain Rostova wasn't finished. She gave Daisy a respectful nod, left her in David's capable hands, and turned. Her expression, which had been one of deep reverence when speaking to Daisy, now hardened into granite. She began the slow, deliberate walk back to first class. Every eye in the cabin followed her. The air crackled with anticipation. It was a predator's walk. Marcus Anderson saw her coming. He had shrunk in his seat, trying to become invisible. The color had not returned to his face. He fumbled to put his laptop away, as if preparing for an impact. Ava stopped next to seat 2A. She didn't lean down. She stood at her full height, forcing him to crane his neck to look up at her. She spoke in a low, controlled voice, but it was pitched to carry to the seats immediately around them. "Mr. Anderson." She began, the name falling from her lips like a piece of ice. "Captain, I had no idea." He stammered, his usual bravado completely gone. "It was a misunderstanding. I was just stressed from a business call." "A misunderstanding," Eva interrupted, her voice dangerously quiet. "You publicly berated and humiliated another passenger. You handled her property without consent. You were rude and disruptive to my crew. That's not a misunderstanding, Mr. Anderson. That is a violation of the conditions of carriage that you ag moor to when you purchased your ticket." The passenger next to Marcus suddenly found the safety card in the seat back pocket to be the most fascinating document he had ever read. "My airline," Ava continued, "prides itself on providing a safe and respectful environment for all passengers. Your status as a premium flyer does not give you a license to abuse others, least of all a passenger, who it turns out is one of the most distinguished and important figures in the entire aviation industry." She leaned in just a fraction, lowering her voice further, so it was a near whisper, but one filled with menace. "The case you called a piece of junk and tried to kick down the jet bridge. Its contents are likely classified proprietary technology, so valuable that your net worth probably wouldn't cover the cost of the schematics on her tablet. You didn't just insult a passenger, sir. You displayed a staggering level of ignorance while sitting inside a monument to her genius." Marcus was speechless. His face, which had been pale, was now turning a blotchy red. Humiliation radiated from him in waves. "Now here is what is going to happen," Ava said, straightening up. "You are going to remain in your seat. You will not speak to Dr. Moore. You will not look at Dr. Moore. You will not cause a single further disturbance for the remainder of this flight. When we land in Seattle, you will remain seated until I give you permission to deplane, and you will be the last person off this aircraft. Am I understood?" Marcus could only manage a weak, pathetic nod. "And one more thing," Eva added. "I have instructed my crew not to serve you any more alcoholic beverages for the rest of the flight, and upon landing your diamond medallion status will be placed under immediate review by our corporate office, pending a full report on your behavior today. We do not value customers who create a hostile environment on our aircraft, regardless of how much they fly." With that, she turned on her heel and walked back to the cockpit, her mission accomplished. The message was clear and devastating. Marcus Anderson, the man who lived by a currency of status and privilege, had just been publicly stripped of all of it. He had been rendered insignificant. For the next 4 hours, Marcus sat in a state of mortified silence. The first-class cabin, which he usually treated as his private lounge, felt like a prison cell. The flight attendants who he was used to commanding now moved past him with cool, professional indifference. They served the passengers around him, but to them Seat 2A was a void. The poetic justice was absolute. He was trapped at 37,000 feet inside the masterpiece of a woman he had scorned, forced to breathe the perfectly filtered air her environmental systems had designed, and to look out the oversized, dimmable window that was one of her signature innovations. He was a guest in her house, and he had behaved abominably. And now he was paying the price. The remainder of the flight to Seattle passed in a state of transformed reality. The atmosphere within the aluminum and composite tube, soaring miles above the earth, had fundamentally shifted. The typical cabin ambiance, a mixture of boredom, impatience, and individual distraction, was replaced by a palpable collective sense of awe and respect. The anonymous passenger in Seat 12C had been revealed as the architect of their vessel, and this knowledge permeated every corner of the cabin. Passengers no longer saw a middle-aged woman in simple clothes. They saw a visionary. They glanced at her not with idle curiosity, but with a deference typically reserved for celebrities or heads of state. The man in 12B who had been buried in a spreadsheet before the revelation now sat rigidly, almost comically afraid to intrude upon her personal space. A young woman, a few rows back, an engineering student from Columbia, spent the rest of the flight discreetly typing into her phone, her face illuminated by the glow of articles and patents bearing the name Dr. Daisy Moore. She was for these few hours an unwitting mentor, a living lesson in achievement. Dr. Daisy Moore herself navigated this sudden intense notoriety with the same quiet grace she had displayed during the confrontation. She felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, a sensation she had experienced before, but usually in lecture halls or corporate boardrooms, never in the anonymous space of an airplane cabin. It was unsettling, yet tinged with a profound and weary irony. For decades, she had fought for a seat at the table for her voice to be heard over the din of skepticism. Now, on a random Tuesday, a moment of ugly prejudice had inadvertently given her more recognition than any of her countless accolades ever could in a public forum. She politely declined the unending flow of champagne and first-class meals David Chen attempted to press upon her, accepting only a cup of black tea. "David," she said kindly, noticing his earnest, almost nervous desire to please her. "You and your crew run a remarkable cabin. The passenger experience, even under duress, is a testament to your professionalism. You should be proud." David, a man who had calmed down hijack scares and delivered a baby at 30,000 feet, found himself blushing like a rookie. That means a great deal, Doctor. Truly, If you don't mind me asking the way the cabin lights dim and brighten during takeoff and landing to match the sunrise or sunset, was that your team's design?" Daisy's face lit up with a genuine smile, the first she had shown all day. "It was. We spent months on the psycho-visual effects of ambient lighting. The goal was to reduce jet lag by syncing the passengers' circadian rhythms to the destination's time zone from the moment they boarded. It's the little things that make the big difference." For the next hour, they spoke in hushed tones about airflow dynamics, the science of reducing cabin noise, and the specific tensile strength of the fuselage. For David, it was like a masterclass from the master herself. For Daisy, it was a welcome return to the comfortable world of facts and physics, a refuge from the uncomfortable complexities of human behavior. As the plane began its long, graceful descent into the Pacific Northwest, the majestic snow-capped peak of Mount Rainier, dominating the horizon, Captain Eva Rostova's voice came over the PA system. Her tone was different from the standard pre-recorded sounding announcements. It was personal, imbued with a deep sincerity. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking from the flight deck. We are beginning our final approach into Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. We should be on the ground in approximately 25 minutes. On behalf of Global Air and your entire flight crew today, I want to thank you for flying with us." She paused, and in that brief silence, the entire cabin seemed to hold its breath. "It has been our distinct and unexpected privilege to have you on board, especially some of you. We wish you a safe and pleasant stay in the Seattle area or on your onward journey. The landing was flawless, a textbook touchdown that kissed the runway with barely a shudder." As the 787 taxied toward the gate, a strange stillness held the cabin. The usual mad dash to unbuckle to grab bags from overhead bins was absent. Everyone remained seated, waiting. They all knew what was coming. When the jet bridge connected and the soft chime indicated the door was open, Captain Rostova emerged from the cockpit. Her face was set in a formal professional expression. She planted herself in the galley between first class and the exit, a uniformed sentinel. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice leaving no room for argument. "We have a particularly distinguished guest on board today who has an important engagement to attend. We kindly ask that all passengers remain in their seats until Dr. Moore has deplaned." Ava then walked with purpose down the aisle to seat 12C. "Doctor," she said, her voice now warm and personal, "your chariot awaits." Daisy gathered her satchel and stood. As she moved to retrieve her Pelican case from the overhead bin, David Chen was instantly there. "Allow me, Doctor." He handed it to her, with a reverence usually reserved for a holy relic. Her walk up the aisle was like a procession. It was a silent, moving tribute from a random collection of strangers who had for a few hours shared the sky with her. A businessman in a rumpled suit nodded deeply as she passed. The young engineering student from earlier caught her eye and whispered a quiet, heartfelt, "Thank you." Daisy acknowledged each gesture with a small, gracious nod, her composure absolute. At the front of the plane, she paused and turned to Ava, the two powerful women facing each other. "Captain Rostova, your command today, both of this aircraft and of the situation within it, was exemplary. You turned a moment of ugliness into one of grace. Thank you." "It was my duty and my honor, Doctor," Eva replied, shaking her hand firmly. "The honor was all ours. Please, if there is anything you or the Boeing company ever need from Global Air, my name is Eva Rostova. You will have my direct line." Daisy smiled, a gesture that conveyed a deep mutual understanding between two professionals at the top of their respective fields. Then she was gone, disappearing down the jet bridge on her way to her next appointment with the future of flight. Only after David confirmed she was clear of the gate area did Eva Rostova step aside. "First class, you may now deplane," she said, her eyes immediately locking onto seat 2A. The other first-class passengers filed out, many of them casting glances of either pity or contempt at Marcus Anderson. He waited, marinating in his own public disgrace, until he was the very last soul in the passenger cabin. The flight attendants went about their post-flight checks with a cool efficiency, their movements pointedly ignoring his existence. The vibrant, luxurious cabin now felt like a cold, empty stage. Finally he stood. He straightened his tie, a reflexive, pathetic attempt to regain some semblance of his former status. He gathered his gleaming briefcase and walked the short, yet infinitely long distance to the exit. He did not look at the captain or the purser. The shame was a physical weight pressing down on his shoulders. Just as he was about to step over the threshold and escape into the anonymity of the terminal, Eva's voice, calm and cutting as a surgeon's scalpel, stopped him. "Mr. Anderson." He froze his back to her. "I hope you learned something today about value," she said, her voice even devoid of anger, but heavy with judgment. "It's not about the brand of your suit or the price of your luggage. It's about what you build, what you contribute, and the respect you show to the people around you. Today you sat in a multi-million-dollar marvel of engineering, and you failed to see the genius who created it sitting right in front of you. You saw only what you wanted to see." She paused. "I suspect that might be the most expensive mistake you've made in a very long time. Have a pleasant day." Without another word, Marcus Anderson stepped off the plane, his long, lonely walk of shame just beginning. Later that evening, in her sterile, elegantly appointed hotel room overlooking Puget Sound, Daisy Moore placed her Pelican case on the desk and clicked open the latches. The familiar, satisfying sound echoed in the quiet room. She carefully removed the high-precision calibrator and her ruggedized tablet. On the screen, she pulled up the complex, beautiful, and deeply familiar schematics of the 787's wing-to-body join. She looked at the intricate lines of code and the 3D renderings, then looked out her window at the evening sky. A stream of lights, other airplanes filled with other lives, streaked towards the heavens. For a moment, the day's events replayed in her mind, the sneer, the laugh, the fury, the astonishing apology, the final, quiet vindication. It wasn't triumph she felt. It was a profound sense of continuity. This was not the first Marcus Anderson she had encountered, and he would not be the last. He was just another data point in a long career built on overcoming the low expectations of others. The incident was not a victory for her, but for the work. The work was the point. The work was what endured. It was in the silent, graceful flexing of the wings, in the clean air of the cabin, in the millions of safe miles flown every single day. The work was her true, unassailable legacy, and tomorrow morning there was a critical review to prepare for. There was still more work to be done. Dr. Daisy Moore's story is a powerful reminder that brilliance, integrity, and true value are not always advertised. They don't come in fancy packaging. Sometimes they come in a scuffed, unassuming case carried by a quiet, dignified woman who happens to be a titan of her industry. The clash on Global Air Flight 815 wasn't just about a rude passenger. It was a battle between superficiality and substance, and in the end, substance won a resounding victory. It teaches us to look beyond our own biases, to question our snap judgments, and to remember that we might just be in the presence of greatness without even knowing it. If you were inspired by this incredible story of quiet genius and ultimate vindication, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to see that true worth isn't what's on the outside. And most importantly, subscribe and ring that notification bell so you won't miss our next story about the hidden heroes and unbelievable moments that happen all around us. Thank you for listening.